Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The Supreme Court of India today has delivered a historic verdict, one that will shape the way the world's biggest election will be fought. 2 months ahead of the elections, the Supreme Court has launched a surgical strike on electoral bonds. Electoral bonds, as you know, have been the primary source of funding for political parties, especially the BJP, for the last 6 years. Now the Supreme Court has not just buried the scheme, it has also told the State Bank of India to give unencashed money back to the donors. Not just that, the court has also ordered for the names of secret donors to be made public. Interesting times lie ahead. Now, why did the Supreme Court do what it did? You will hear from the Chief Justice of India in just a bit, right here on the show. But essentially, the Supreme Court is acknowledging that there are no free lunches in this world. So, if a corporate donor is giving you crores of rupees in donation, getting a tax exemption on it, and has a law that lets his donation be secret, then it's pretty clear why the guy is donating to you at all. It's called quid pro quo, and the Supreme Court has used this terminology. So essentially, the court has called the scheme unconstitutional and said it violates a citizen's right to know. The government's argument about electoral bonds wiping out black money from elections was also today called out by the Supreme Court. Listen in from the Chief Justice of India.
The anonymity of the contributor is intrinsic to the electoral bond scheme. The electoral bond scheme is not distinguishable from other modes of contributions through banking channels such as checks, transfer through the electronic clearing system, or direct debit if the anonymity component of the stream is struck down. Thus, the electoral bond scheme 2018 will have to be struck down as unconstitutional. At a primary level, political contributions give a seat at the table to the contributor. That is, it enhances access to legislators. This access also translates into influence over policy making. There is also a legitimate possibility that financial contribution to a political party would lead to quid pro quo arrangements because of the close nexus between money and politics. Quid pro quo arrangements could be in the form of introducing a policy change or granting a license to the person making financial contribution to the political party in power. The electoral bond scheme and the impugned provisions, to the extent that they infringe upon the right to information of the voter by anonymizing contributions through electoral bonds, are violative of Article 19(1)(a). The electoral bond scheme is not the only means for curbing black money in electoral financing. There are other alternatives which substantially fulfill the purpose and impact the right to information minimally when compared to the impact of electoral bonds on the right to information. On an overall balance of the impact of the alternative means on the right to information and its ability to fulfill the purpose, for contributions below 20,000 rupees, contributions through other means of electronic transfer is the least restrictive means. For contributions above 20,000 rupees, contributions through electoral trust is the least restrictive means. Thus, the infringement of the right to information is not proportionately justified for the purpose of curbing black money and electoral financing. The details of political parties which have received contributions through electoral bonds since the interim order of this court dated 12 April 2019 till date to the Election Commission of India. SBI must disclose details of each electoral bond encashed by political parties, which shall include the date of encashment and the denomination of the electoral bond. D. SBI shall submit the above information to the ECI within 3 weeks from the date of this judgment, that is by 6 March 2024. E. The ECI shall publish the information shared by the SBI on its official website within 1 week of the receipt of the information, that is by 13 March 2024. And F. Electoral bonds which are within the validity period of 15 days, which have not been encashed by political parties yet, shall be returned by the political party to the purchaser, depending on who is in possession of the bond, to the issuing bank. The issuing bank, upon the return of the valid bond, shall refund the amount to the purchaser's account.
Now, can this verdict be challenged? That is something that we'll talk about in just a bit. But for the moment, let me tell you that the opposition, as expected, is hailing the verdict, especially the Congress that got 7 times less money via electoral bonds compared to the BJP. Congress MP Rahul Gandhi has gone ahead and accused the BJP of using electoral bonds as a medium for bribes.
Nobody would give an electoral bond for 10 lakhs or 15 lakhs. It'll be in crores, right? So if you've funded your political party with 5,000 to 6,000 crores, you can imagine only the rich could have done that. And they must have in the process got some favors. So I think in a sense, this it provides for a level playing field in democracy, right? And it also exposes the BJP to perhaps the biggest, the Prime Minister keeps on saying, where is the scam, where is the scam, or where it is now, Modi ji, right in front of your eyes, your scam, this government scam.
I do hope that the government does not go in review and try and derail this Constitution bench decision, because it is keeping in with the spirit of encouraging probity in public life. The fact remains that electoral bonds and their intrinsic opacity were an albatross around the neck of the political system. The Supreme Court has tried to alleviate that albatross, and therefore under those circumstances it is important that the decision should be implemented in its right spirit.
Okay, speaking about level playing field, well, when it came to electoral bonds, that level playing field never actually existed. The BJP, needless to say, was its biggest beneficiary. Just take a look at the numbers. The numbers tell you the story. In total, including the latest tranche, and there have been 30 so far, 16,518 crore electoral bonds were sold by the SBI. This in the last 6 years. It was implemented, came into effect in 2018. Of this money, 16,500 plus crores, how much did the BJP get? Nearly 55%. The Congress received just about 9.5%. This is interesting. 54% of the BJP's total income last year came from where? It came from electoral bonds. That was a whopping 2,120 crores. Now, you've seen the figures here. So one thing is very clear. Don't let the numbers confuse you. What is very clear is that more than 50% of the electoral bonds were for the BJP. Just to give you perspective, the total donations declared by the BJP are 5 times more than the total donations declared by the Congress, by the Aam Aadmi Party, the Communist Party of India, and the National People's Party, all together, put together for the same period. Now, while the Congress may argue that it's only the BJP that is benefiting from electoral bonds, let me tell you that regional parties too have done pretty well via these electoral bonds. Just take a look at the graphic on your screens. That's data for you. And this is data that ADR, that the Association for Democratic Reforms, has put out for the financial year 2022-23. So what you have is electoral bonds forming 97% of the total income of the TMC. So of all regional parties, the TMC gets the most. 97% of its income comes from electoral bonds. So if electoral bonds go, then regional parties get impacted as well, not just the BJP. 86% of the DMK's income comes from electoral bonds, 84% for the BJD, for the YSRCP 70%, and for the BRS 71%. Now, the BJP, as you know, is at the receiving end because, as I told you, out of the total electoral bonds that have been sold in this country, over 50% have gone to the BJP. The BJP is now accusing the opposition parties of politicizing the issue. It's also saying that it is using the Supreme Court verdict to target the BJP-led NDA government. Listen in.
moving towards preventing black money to come or slush money to come into the electoral process should be stopped. So this scheme which was brought with an idea that somehow you should have money coming from the banks into the political parties, which means clean money, not black money, giving an option of anonymity to the people who were donating so that they are not pressurized by other political parties or any other element. But on that aspect, if the Honorable Supreme Court feels that this is violating another act, the identity should be known, that has to be respected. That does not mean that the movement towards clean funding in politics and all this has come to an end.
Now, how does today's verdict from the Supreme Court impact the elections that are barely 2 months away? Joining me is a former Chief Election Commissioner, S.Y. Qureshi, someone who has written extensively about electoral bonds and why they are harmful for democracy. Mr. Qureshi, good evening and thank you very much for your time. First things first, there are many people who are calling today's verdict historic. Is that your view as well? And why is the timing important?
Well, the timing is important in the sense that general elections are quite close. It's about a month away. And at the same time, don't forget that the case has been pending for 6 years. And it was not very fair of the Supreme Court to keep it hanging and pending for 6 long years. But as they say, better late than never. They've come out with a brilliant judgment, a historic and landmark judgment. And I salute the Supreme Court. And I must say that my faith and trust in the Supreme Court has gone up sky high.
Okay, so you're calling this a landmark judgment, but the government has argued and the BJP argues that the electoral bonds were actually bought in to eliminate black money from elections. So the money that was used in elections would be clean. What is the problem in that?
No, not at all. The government has been misleading from the beginning. Let me tell you, if you recall, the scheme was introduced through the budget, which should not have happened. But in any case, I was hearing the budget speech on television in 2017 when finance minister came out with 2 very important sentences which were music to my ears. His first sentence was that without transparency of political funding, free and fair elections are not possible. That is exactly what we have been saying. Now, why does the donor want to keep it a secret? That is something which I have been writing about from day one, because we felt that he wants to hide the quid pro quo. There is no free lunch, as they say. If somebody donates for 5 crore, 10 crores, 20 crores, they want something in return. And what will that be? A contract, a license, or maybe a big loan, which, as you know, they regularly run away to other countries. So some of these things would have happened. That's why they wanted secrecy. They wanted to hide the quid pro quo. People wanted transparency. Now, whose the want and whose desire is more sacrosanct? The people's or the donors? The donors have been donating for 70 years. There was no problem. So therefore, the whole thing was phony, and the bluff has been called out. My only regret is that it took 6 long years. Why was it not taken up immediately when the case was brought before the Supreme Court?
But Mr. Qureshi, there is something to be said about laws being applied retrospectively, right? And the Supreme Court has spoken about that as well. Corporate donors are now saying we donated under the protection of a law that guaranteed us secrecy. If that guarantee of secrecy wasn't there, we would not have donated. Now, okay, you scrap electoral bonds, you scrap the scheme. But why are you taking away that cloak of secrecy from us and making our names public? Why implement it retrospectively?
No, well, corporates may make that silly mistake. They can go to the court, but at the same time, the court has the fact that courts took 6 long years to sit on it. And after hearing the argument for several days, they reserved the judgment and they wrote the judgment after the due consideration for 3 months, more than 3 months, and all 5 have come to a unanimous conclusion. It will not be easy upturn the judgment, their own judgment on the basis of these frivolous arguments. And in fact, that will only confirm that they had things to hide. Why were they funding? What, in fact, when the information is revealed to the public, I'm sure there will be people who are waiting with bated breath to microscopically examine who donated and who are the donors who are under different kinds of intelligence and the agencies' pressures. So the quid pro quo and the fears and the threats and all that was being speculated will now come out in the open, and transparency was the key word used by the Supreme Court repeatedly. So democracy thrives in transparency, and that has been restored. And anybody who challenges it, well, I think will make a fool of himself.
My last question to you, and I ask you this question because this is a question that is hanging in the air. Can the government, now we understand this is a constitutional bench verdict, but can the government bring in an ordinance now to circumvent the surgical strike right ahead of elections?
I think so. I don't think the government is smart enough to understand this. This is a decision of the Constitution bench of the Supreme Court. So very casually, it is not some small court giving some casual decision. This is a considered opinion, a constitutional judgment of the Constitution bench of the Supreme Court. So the overturning it by an ordinance, I think that will be the gravest mistake the government will even consider doing.
Okay. Always a pleasure, Dr. Qureshi, to have you on the show and get your perspective. Thank you very much for joining us at the top of Urban Debate this evening. My guests this evening, waiting patiently, Pradeep Mahor, leader of the BJP, Kailash Adhikari, MD Governance Now, Suleiman Mohammad Khan is spokesperson of the Congress Party, Sanjay Hegde is a senior advocate, and Shivani Kapoor is the program lead at legal at ADR, which is one of the litigants, which is one of the petitioners in the case. Sanjay Hegde, I want to come to you first with a question actually I have. And many people are asking this, whether it's even legally possible that the government, so what are the options before the government? The government clearly, why would they, why would they let a golden goose be butchered, as it was, Sanjay Hegde? So what options does the government have? Does the government have the option to appeal the verdict? Say in a seven-judge bench, is that an option? Does the government have an option to bring in an ordinance? Is that even possible?
Government doesn't have an option of an appeal. There is no intra-court appeal in the Supreme Court. It's not that you don't like the 3-judge bench, you go to a 5-judge bench, and you don't like 5, you go to 7, and things like that. Then, as far as the ordinance question is concerned, I don't think the government has that option. Long ago, the Supreme Court, another constitution bench of the Supreme Court, decided that a legislature or parliament in this case could not directly undo a verdict of the Supreme Court or of any court.
Okay.
You can take away the basis of a judgment. Supposing a judgment says that this is our interpretation of this particular section, because the wording of the section is thus. You can always change the wording of the section and take away the basis of the judgment, and you could do it with retrospective effect. We have seen that happen earlier in Vodafone and things like that. But when there is a judgment on the basis of constitutional provisions, there is no basis that you can take away. You will have to then possibly amend the constitution. You will have, and here is a judgment which says that certain provisions which have been brought in are manifestly arbitrary. So the Supreme Court in the Kaveri reference said that you cannot directly overrule a judgment, because that would make Parliament a super Supreme Court. So you can't do that. And even if you brought in an ordinance or legislation to try and overcome this judgment, if it is done so close to elections, there are definitely political costs. The people of India are not stupid. The people of India are watching. So I doubt that these kind of extreme measures will be resorted to. What is possible, however,
Okay.
What is possible, however, is that the government might try government or its organizations, including the State Bank of India, might try to slow walk the implementation of this judgment. They might say, we don't have the data, we are collating the data, please don't do it in 4 weeks, give us more time, and things like that. And thus, try and send it beyond the elections.
Okay, but here's the thing, Mr. Hegde, the fact is that the Supreme Court has very clearly told the State Bank of India that with immediate effect, you have to stop issuing these electoral bonds. So paisa to aana band ho jayega na. Now, if the names of corporate leaders, when they will be revealed, whether in the next 3 weeks, whether in the next 20 weeks, chalo wo dekh lenge, but at least paisa aana band ho jayega. Now, many people can argue, Kailash Adhikari, that the electoral bonds have made political parties, especially the BJP, very, very rich already. They are flush with funds. They have enough money to fight this election, given the fact that 50% of the money that comes via electoral bonds to political parties goes to the BJP. How do you think this will shape the upcoming election, Kailash Adhikari? And how do you view, what the Supreme Court has said and done today?
Shreya, I don't see any major effect on the upcoming general elections, or this could have an effect on any voter influencing or the sentiment of the voter. The decision by the Honorable Supreme Court of India, the temple of judiciary and justice in this country, is most welcome. And because the Supreme Court found that it to be an unconstitutional way of sending money, you definitely have donations being given through trust. That is a particular manner and factor. But I do not see this as a major dampener for the upcoming general elections for any party, not just the Bharatiya Janata Party, for any party. And I don't see this as a major factor in the voter sentiment. You have other methods such as electoral trusts, and each and every party was beneficiary of this electoral bonds. So it's not just about the Bharatiya Janata Party.
Okay, is that something that you agree with, Shivani Kapoor, that every party was a beneficiary of the electoral bonds, so the impact will not just be on the BJP. Now we know the numbers that you constantly put out every 6 months, every year, tell us that the biggest beneficiary is actually the BJP. So will it have an impact on the upcoming elections or not? I don't care about the voter sentiment for the moment. I just care about the money that funds elections.
See, the money for the general election 2024, whatever money they wanted, they needed to collect for themselves or for the campaign of the whole strategy of, Lok Sabha 24, that they have already done. I mean, it is only 1 month left for the next election. Okay. So, nothing major will happen as far as the money part is concerned. What should have been done was that if Supreme Court would have just given that judgment maybe 2-3 years back, or maybe first time when we had filed the interim application during the 2019 Lok Sabha election, maybe then this would have made some difference. But for this particular election, the money has already been collected by the political parties. But yes, it is a landmark judgment. It is a great and a bold step taken by the Supreme Court of India in this day and age. And for the next elections, at least for the future elections, for the future assembly elections, at least something can be done. I mean, this unchecked, unregulated, anonymous, funding, at least this will be stopped. But that doesn't mean that the whole system of political funding is now very transparent and accountable. We still have to think about the system which was already in place prior to 2017, before the electoral bond scheme had come. We have to think about that as well. We have to also think about the fact that there is unlimited election expenditure of political parties. There is no CAG audit of political parties' account. We also have to think about the fact that 20,000, donation below 20,000, they don't need to be given by the political parties in their statements. So donation only above 20 and 20,000 above, that has to be given. So political parties do that. They always say in their statement that they have received funding below 20,000, like BSP has been doing that for a very long time. So all these issues are still there. But nevertheless, this is a landmark judgment indeed. Okay. And the electoral bonds and unlimited anonymous corporate funding that needed to go, and it has gone now.
No, the fact is that pre-2017, before the electoral bonds came in, the election funding process was rotten. And of course, the electoral bonds, there was a question mark about, about its constitutional validity, and the Supreme Court today has called them unconstitutional.
Yes, yes. See, the lacuna in law is still there.
Before 2017, it was rotten, and post 2017, it became compromised. So, Suleiman Mohammad Khan, it's almost like you will never have a system of political funding that is completely clean. I think all of us will just have to accept that. But do you think the judgment has come way too late, 6 years too late? Because jitna paisa election लड़ने के लिए political parties को चाहिए, खासकर कि बीजेपी को चाहिए, वो तो उनके पास already आ गया है. Everyone knew that the verdict is going to be today. The verdict was reserved when? It was reserved on November 2nd. So I'm fairly certain all the money that needs to be collected has already been collected. So this election, it's not going to change the fortunes of the Congress party or the India Alliance or the BJP for that matter.
Shreya, I must say first of all that better late than never. I think it's a welcome step. We are wholeheartedly welcoming on behalf of the Congress party the judgment of the Supreme Court. And why we are so happy and welcoming this judgment, for the reason is from the very first day since 2017, we have been opposing this electoral bond scheme, saying that it will bring, it will be opaque system, it will bring corruption, it will be a means, to have commissions and corrupt money transferred to the party in power through this legalized electoral system. And then the resources of the country will be plundered by the, cronies of the close friends of the Prime Minister, crony capitalist. That is what we have been saying for past 6-7 years since the scheme came. Yes, if Supreme Court would have pronounced this judgment 4 years back or 5 years back, it would have been better. But see the amounts, what Supreme Court has reflected, 9,190 crores of electoral bonds which have been donated to the political parties. Out of those 9,000 crores, 6,564 crores to one party. That is the BJP. What is the quid pro quo? The question is, the mines, the ports, the airports, the natural resources of the countries have been given to the cronies by the Prime Minister and the BJP at the throwaway prices in lieu of these 6,564 crores. These are the questions. I have a counter argument. And Supreme Court put two very important questions. Shreya,
I have a counter question. Why? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Supreme Court said whether these amendments will violate right to information under 19(1)(a) of the Constitution. Supreme Court said yes, it is unconstitutional because it is violative of the fundamental rights. Second question Supreme Court said is that unlimited corporate funding violates the principles of free and fair elections. Supreme Court said yes. That is what Modi ji wanted. Unlimited corporate funding not to have a level playing field for all political parties. BJP, the party in power, will get everything. Other party will get a lesser share. It will not be a free and fair election. And see the opaque nature of this scheme.
No, Suleiman Mohammad Khan's fact is, if you look at the way India votes, Mr. Khan, now hear me out. Look at the way India votes. Right? Look at the way India voted last time. It voted for the BJP. We have to accept that. Now, corporates come from, from this milieu itself. And corporates feel the BJP is a better party in the party in the center. They bring stability to the country. They are good for business. And we'll give them money. So, usme kaun si badi baat hai? Why are you saying level playing field gets disturbed here? If as a corporate, I feel that I want to give my money to the BJP, and I'm getting a tax rebate for it, and I'm getting stability, why are you saying there has to be a quid pro quo? Ideologically भी भाई किसी को donate कर सकते हैं. That I believe in this party, मैं इनको donate करूँगा.
बिल्कुल करें. I believe, Shreya ji, India is a welfare state, and to my understanding, the constitutional guarantee is there should be equal distribution of wealth, or you want, or the corporates want, that all the wealth is accumulated in 1% or 2% people of the country, and the others starve and die with hunger. That is what has been happening in this country. Richer are getting richer.
No, Mr. Khan.
Poorer. That is what
that's fine. That's fine. Let's not talk about that right now. My limited point, Mr. Khan, is that is not the fight that needs to be fought on this particular matter. My
This is all
limited
connected,
point is,
Shreya.
it's my money and I can choose who I want to give it to. You can't tell
So,
me कि
yes.
मैं 100 rupees दे रहा हूँ तो 50
yeah,
rupees
yes.
मुझे
I'll
BJP
just
को
reply
देना
to
और
that.
50 India
I'll
Alliance
just-
को देना.
I'll
It's
just
my
reply.
money.
Yeah, very right, very right. You know,
Huh.
as a businessman, I will give money to a party who is going to benefit me the most. So BJP is benefiting the capitalist cronies, these industrialists. At whose expense? At the expense of general man, general public of the country, the poor, the suppressed,
So, bhai,
the oppressed,
industrialists
the
are,
backwards,
matlab,
the
you know,
Dalit,
I
the
don't know why
minorities.
we use the word industrialist as a gali. No, Mr. Khan, we can't use the word industrialist like a gali. Bhaiya, they are citizens
I'm
of this
not saying
country.
that.
They give
I'm not
employment to
saying
many,
that.
many
They are
people.
very
Yes,
important.
yes, they are rich, but being rich is not a
You
crime.
misunderstood me. They are good for the
Anyhow,
country. Yes,
I think Mr.
They
Hegde
are.
wanted to come in.
No. I am saying they are. They are good for the growth of the country. But few
Sulaiman.
handpicked people who are looting the country, taking the share of others. That is the problem. That is the problem, madam.
Can I come in?
And the problem is what
Acha, theek
Supreme
hai.
Court has said. This
Yes,
scheme
yes,
is
Mr. Hegde, come in. Okay, Mr.
You know,
Khan, I've heard you.
Okay.
So, see,
I've heard
see,
you.
the
Mr.
point-
Hegde, go ahead.
The point is a quid pro quo happens when if an industrialist donates, then he gets extra spectrum, or supposing he gets a particular industrial plot allotted, or if he gets a concession, that is when a quid pro quo happens, and that is punishable even under the Prevention of Corruption Act. What the Supreme Court is saying is that the system of electoral bonds is likely to be misused for quid pro quos. It is not as if an industrialist is voting with his money. I like the BJP, therefore I am sending it so much money. It often happens that it's not only the BJP. Look at the state level elections. Between two big politicians, you know that this fellow is likely to come into power the next time, and you pay him in electoral bonds for his campaign, so that as soon as he comes into power, a few select files get processed immediately. Where there is a direct nexus, that's where a quid pro quo. This is one part. The other part often happens is that a ruling party, which is likely to repeat itself, sometimes can collect even protection money. Do you want certain agencies after you? No. Anyway, I have my elections. Please send so and so in electoral bonds. So these are the kind of dangers to our democracy, which have now been stopped.
Okay. Okay. So this verdict then is landmark in multiple ways. But Mr. Hegde, I have a question. Today, if I'm a big corporate who has donated 50 crore rupees to any party, say to the BJP, I can turn around and say I did it because the law guaranteed me a cloak of secrecy and anonymity. This was supposed to be a secret donation. How can the court now say, and I had a law protecting me, a law of this country protecting me. So how can the Supreme Court now say, well, that cloak of invisibility has been removed and all your names will be made public?
Okay, now
Can the
now
court
just,
do, I mean, can the court do that, and can this be challenged in the Supreme Court? And do you think it will be challenged in the Supreme Court by any corporate? Although if they do, then, you know, they've blown the lid on who's been contributing to whom.
Yes, so no, the point is that these things often happen. You buy a building, you put in your hard-earned money, you buy a flat in a building. That building was built on the assumption that it was legal. But the Supreme Court or some court says that no, it is not legal because it was based on this concession. This concession is not applicable to such cases. Therefore, demolish the entire building. You remember that Supertech building where so many people bought flats? So yes, these things happen. And in this particular case, I believe that way back in 2019 itself, there was an interim order which said that this anonymity is protected for the time being only until the final hearing of the case. Thirdly, you know, I appeared in this matter. I appeared for an intervener. People who had interests in the matter came forward and intervened. Every corporate who had donated had the option of intervening, and then they chose not to. Now, at this late stage, to wake up and say, oh, we did not know anything about it, that is not something that will be entertained.
Okay. Pradeep Mahar, then come in here. Do you see this, as someone who speaks on behalf of the BJP, do you see this as a big setback to the ruling dispensation?
Are you asking me? Hello.
Yes, Mr. Mahar, go ahead, please. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening. There was some sound error. So first of all, I heard all the discussion that was going on. And it is being celebrated, something like it is a setback for BJP. First of all, we need to understand that BJP has been trying to bring electoral reforms. In this process of bringing the electoral reforms, what we are doing, what BJP is doing is, the government is doing is, they are bringing some new things. There can be different opinions. Supreme Court had a different opinion on the subject that electoral bond should not be there. Government had a different opinion that it is good for the democracy. So that opinion, definitely, Supreme Court has given the judgment, and everybody honors the Supreme Court judgment. Not an issue with that. And in case tomorrow it is again, there is a revision, filed in the court, and court gives a decision that there was something correct in that. So it cannot be considered as the previous decision was something wrong. Whenever you bring a new system, there would be some challenges in the system. There would be some positive things in the system. So ratifications and new developments have to happen. It should not be considered as it is a setback for BJP. Instead of wait a minute. Instead of
how is it not a setback for the BJP? How is it not a setback for the BJP? Look at what the court has said. I'm paraphrasing the court, but look at what the court has said. The system for election reforms that you brought in, Mr. Mahar, the Supreme Court is saying you did it to bring mischief.
So what about, I can even challenge the checks. I can even challenge the cash payments. So there would be 100 errors in, check payments, double the errors in cash payments, right? So somehow only one instrument that was introduced.
नहीं problem Mr. Mahar anonymity की है.
Tomorrow.
Mr. Mahar, the big problem is anonymity. If I as a corporate donor is donating to the BJP or to the TMC or to the DMK or to the Congress party, why should a law guarantee me secrecy? अगर मैं दे रहा हूँ आपको पैसा तो मैं आपको पैसा दे रहा हूँ. इसमें शर्म की बात किया है, इसमें छुपाने की बात किया है. और अगर शर्म और छुपाने की बात कुछ है, then clearly there is दाल में काला. Clearly there is some quid pro quo involved. This is what the Supreme Court is saying. The highest court of this land. And of course it is a setback for the BJP because the BJP is the one that bought in the scheme.
So who will decide it is a setback for BJP or not? Ultimately, BJP has to decide. That's what I'm saying. It's not a setback. BJP is doing its work. Government is doing its work. They are bringing new instruments. Let me answer your question. You said that about the clause of confidentiality. So anonymity and confidentiality are two different things. First of all, we need to understand. Court has put out that the word in anonymity. I consider that it was confidentiality, not anonymity, first of all, because ultimately there were, whatever the payments that were made through this bond, they were channelized through the banks. And anybody, any of the government organizations can easily trace the trail of the payment. It could have easily been traced. So first of all, it is not anonymous. It is definitely confidential. There are many things that are confidential, even which party you are going to vote. That is also confidential. So tomorrow, if somebody says that your choice of voting a party, that confidentiality should not be there, it should be completely transparent. That can be an opinion, but it should
Mr.
not
Mahar,
be
the fact is, अब आप anonymity बोल लें, confidentiality बोल दें, ये तो आम आदमी के लिए था और ये opposition parties के लिए था. The ruling government just had to make a call to the SBI chairperson and say, give me the names of all donors and who has donated to whom. So even this, even this anonymity was selective, and therefore concerns that money went to one party and not to the other because one party was in a position to know exactly who was donating to whom. Shivani Kapoor, but there is a point that Mr. Mahar makes that electoral reforms are needed in this country. You need to clean up electoral funding. This was a way we tried it. The Supreme Court didn't approve of it. But there is, just a minute, but the problem is that there is a problem with the way elections are funded in this country.
Yes, there is a problem. Like I was saying that earlier, Shreya, the problem was there are so many recommendations given by so many committees that were formed solely for this purpose. The recent one being the 255th Law Commission report, which had given series of reforms for political funding, which included every single penny should be accounted for. There should be CAG audit. There should be the penalty imposed on the political parties if they don't submit their statements on time. This 20,000 limit and giving of information which is 20,000 and above, that should go. So all these things were there. So instead of taking steps in this direction, what they introduced was electoral bonds and unlimited anonymous corporate donations. So how do you call it reform when the main crux of that scheme and the corporate donation was anonymity, unlimited donation, where only the government in power has the privilege to know that information, who is funding who, what amount is being funded, and even the opposition parties would also know who has given money to which political party, not which, at least to themselves, they would get this information. It was only the common man who was put in the dark. So that was the main problem of this whole scenario of political funding. So instead of bringing those kind of reforms, right from the 1999 Law Commission report to this, the 255th one, they have not brought even one single, of that reform. What they brought was the electoral bonds and this corporate funding.
Okay, Sanjay Hegde, my last question to you. Now, the Supreme Court has said what it has said, and the Supreme Court has done what it has done. Many people are calling this a historic verdict. Okay, many people are calling this a historic verdict. Some are saying it's come too late. But Mr. Hegde, tell me this. If the Supreme Court today had said, we are not striking down electoral bonds, but we are striking down the clause that protects the identity of the corporate donor, would that have been the way forward? Would that have been, a step maybe to clean up India's elections and the way they are funded? Mr. Hegde, you're on mute, please. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Sorry. See, it would have taken you in the court to the policy framework. You take away anonymity but leave the bonds intact. The bonds are freely transferable. What would happen even now, what has often happened is that company A buys the bonds, then it hands it over to the representative of company B or company C. And after 3 or 4 transfers from hand to hand, then it goes to be given to a political party. So that part of that free transferability and all that would also still have big money impacting elections. I gave the Supreme Court one example while arguing. You remember that during the Harshad Mehta scam days, Ram Jethmalani had organized a press conference and shown how 1 crore rupees in those days, where you didn't have 2,000 rupee notes, had to be fitted into a suitcase, which was then supposed to have been left at the Prime Minister's house. Now with an electoral bond, all that you need is an envelope. So striking down the entire scheme of electoral bonds, particularly on the footing that people need to know who is paying their politicians, which corporate is paying which set of politicians, and is there a quid pro quo? I think it is better to strike down the whole thing rather than have a piecemeal approach.
Okay, we'll leave it there then. This has been an interesting discussion. Thank you very much, Sanjay Hegde, for joining us. Shivani Kapoor, good to have you on the show, fighting the good fight for the last 6 years. That's our organization, ADR. Mr. Adhikari, thank you very much. Pradeep Mahar, always good to have you on the show. And Suleiman Mohammad Khan, out of time, but thank you. Thank you for joining us. Completely out of time. I'm slipping into a quick break. There's more news